Atomic Habits. James Clear. How to create a major change in your life through small habits. What habits do you have? You might need a moment of reflection to answer this question, because by definition, a habit is a behavior we perform automatically and without thinking. And we may not always be aware of our habits. Everyone can have various habits, from drinking coffee in the morning to brushing their teeth before bed. These habits are what shape our daily lives. Since we perform habits without conscious thought or attention, we may fail to notice their power. If you repeat any action every day, even the smallest ones, from saving 1,000 tomans to smoking a single cigarette, it will eventually have a significant impact on your life. Therefore, understanding and recognizing the nature of habits and learning to use them allows you to take control of your life and achieve great results. In this booklet, we explain what a habit is, how it forms, and how you can use it to live a better life. Small habits, big impacts. Imagine an airplane taking off from Los Angeles bound for New York. If, during takeoff, the pilot decides to adjust the plane's direction by only 3.5 degrees south, the nose of the plane would shift slightly, so slightly that no one outside the cockpit would notice. But once the flight progresses and the plane passes over cities, that tiny shift becomes significant. The passengers would suddenly find themselves in Washington, D.C., instead of New York. Often we fail to notice small changes because their immediate effects are minor and invisible. If you are overweight and run for 20 minutes today, you will still be overweight tomorrow. Conversely, if you're in shape and order a large pizza for dinner tonight and eat the whole thing, you won't gain noticeable weight overnight. However, if you repeat small actions every day, they will eventually have a major impact on your life. If you eat pizza daily, after a year you'll see significant weight gain. If you run 20 minutes every day, you'll eventually reach your ideal weight, even if you don't notice changes along the way. If you want to make a positive change in your life, understand that change takes time and patience. You must also ensure that your habits are steering you in the right direction, even when you don't see immediate results. If you currently have little money, save a bit each month. You can be sure you are on the right path. The results may not seem remarkable at first, but if you keep moving forward, in a few months or years you will notice real progress. Conversely, if you are a billionaire and carelessly spend more than you earn every month, you might not worry about your bank balance initially, but ultimately you'll realize that the path you've chosen leads to trouble. Creating major changes in your life doesn't require revolutionary action or dramatic transformation. You don't need to overhaul your behavior or lifestyle completely. All it takes is making small adjustments to your habits and behaviors. Because through consistent repetition, over time, they yield extraordinary results. What is a habit? In the previous booklet, we explained that to create major changes, you don't need to do anything big or extraordinary. You simply need constructive, positive habits to reach your goals. In this booklet, we discuss what a habit is, how it forms, and how it operates. When you enter a dark room, without consciously thinking about what to do, you instinctively look for the light switch. That is a habit, a behavior you've repeated so many times that you now perform it automatically. But how do habits form? Our brain learns through trial and error how to respond to new situations and circumstances. Once it discovers the right way to act, it begins to respond automatically, without conscious thought. Edward Thorndike, a 19th-century psychologist, demonstrated this through an experiment with cats. He placed several cats inside a dark box. Naturally, they began to struggle to find a way out. Some scratched the walls until they found a lever that, when pressed, opened the door, allowing them to escape. Thorndike then placed those same cats back in the box and repeated the experiment. After several repetitions, he observed remarkable results. The cats learned how to get out. Instead of struggling for minutes, they went straight to the lever and pressed it. After about 20 to 30 trials on average, the cats could escape in just 6 seconds. Escaping the box had become a habit. a behavior carried out automatically. Thorndike concluded that behaviors producing pleasurable results are repeated until they become automatic. For the cats, the rewarding result was freedom. After several repetitions, the process of escaping became habitual. The same principle applies to humans. Here's how habits work. Every habit begins with a cue or trigger for action. The next phase involves a craving, a desire to change your current state. Then comes the response, the action you take. Finally, the ultimate goal of every habit is the reward. For example, entering a dark room is the cue that prompts you to act. You crave to see again, to change your current situation. The response is flipping the light switch. The reward is the comfort and ease of being able to see your surroundings. Every habit follows this process, and you can identify all four components: cue, craving, response, and reward within it. Do you have a habit of drinking coffee every morning? Waking up is your cue. You crave alertness and energy. Your response is getting out of bed and making a cup of coffee. Your reward is feeling awake and ready to start your day. Of course, not all habits are good ones. Now that you understand how habits function, you should focus your attention on shaping good habits. In the next booklight, we'll talk about building positive habits, building new habits. All of us have cues that trigger specific habitual behaviors. For example, the sound of a phone notification is a cue that prompts you to check your messages. Now that you know certain triggers can spark habitual actions, you can use this knowledge to your advantage and change your habits. In this booklight, we present two methods for changing habits and building new ones. Method 1. A great way to transform your habits is to change the cues. You can modify your environment and surroundings so they encourage better habits. Consider this example. Anne Thorndike, a physician working at a hospital in Boston, once came up with an unusual idea. She wanted to improve the eating habits of hospital staff, patients, and visitors, but she aimed to do it without them consciously deciding to change. To achieve this, she and her colleagues made some adjustments within the hospital. Usually, the refrigerators next to the hospital cafe checkout counter contained only soda bottles, and bottled water was not easily accessible. Thorndike and her team decided to add water bottles to those refrigerators. Furthermore, they placed bottled water in various spots throughout the hospital. The results were fascinating. After 3 months, soda sales decreased by 11%, while water sales increased by 25%. Simply making water more accessible led people to choose the healthier option. Thus, small environmental changes can lead to big differences. Want to practice playing an instrument? Place it in the center of your room where you can see it. Want to eat healthier snacks? Prepare them ahead of time and keep them on your kitchen counter, while storing unhealthy foods out of reach. Make the cues for your desired habits visible so you can't ignore them, and respond to them consistently. Method 2. Another way to build positive habits is by using implementation intentions. Often we don't clearly define our goals. For example, we might say, "I want to eat healthier," and then hope it will just happen. Here's a clear illustration of why implementation intentions matter. In a study about American voters, researchers found something interesting. They asked one group of people when and how they would go to the polling station, and another group whether they would vote or not. Those in the first group were far more likely to vote, because answering those questions required them to set a specific plan, making them more committed to following through. So don't simply say, "I want to run more." Instead say, "On Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, as soon as I wake up, I'll go outside and run 2 miles. Then place your running shoes somewhere visible so putting them on in the morning feels quick and effortless. By doing this, you set both a clear plan and a visible cue for the habit, and you'll find that establishing the habit of running becomes much easier than you expected. Reward, the motivation to stick to new habits. In 1954, 2 neuroscientists named James Olds and Peter Milner conducted an experiment on rats to study the neurology of desire and motivation. They used electrodes to block the release of the hormone dopamine in the rats' bodies. As a result, the rats lost all desire to live. They showed no interest in eating, drinking, reproducing, or doing anything else. A few days later they died of thirst. Without dopamine, the rats had no will to live. Our brains operate in a similar way. Dopamine release creates in us the desire to act and pursue certain behaviors. Interestingly, dopamine is also released when we simply anticipate or think about pleasurable activities. This mechanism motivates us to take action and engage in those activities. In the brain's reward system, wanting something is essentially equivalent to having it. That is why children greatly enjoy the anticipation of Nowruz, or why we feel excited just by daydreaming about an upcoming trip. We can use this principle to help us form new habits. If our habits are attractive enough that we genuinely look forward to doing them, dopamine is released, and we're more likely to actually perform those habits. To make habits more appealing, you can connect an important but less enjoyable behavior to one that you find fun and rewarding, something that triggers dopamine release. Here's an example of this technique. A college engineering student knew he needed to exercise more, but he didn't enjoy working out. He loved watching Netflix though. So he connected a stationary bike to his laptop and wrote code to allow Netflix shows to play only when he pedaled at a certain speed. By linking exercise with the enjoyable activity of watching Netflix, he turned an unpleasant task into a rewarding habit. You can apply the same strategy in your own life. For instance, if you want to exercise and you enjoy reading film magazines, read them only while you're at the gym. Or, if you love watching football but have important work calls to make, promise yourself that you can watch the match after completing those calls. With this approach, you'll soon notice that even unpleasant tasks start to feel enjoyable, because you've paired them with a satisfying reward. Making habits easier. We usually spend most of our time on behaviors that are easy to do. In contrast, activities like exercising or learning Chinese are difficult and require a great deal of effort. Repeating these tasks daily and turning them into habits can be quite challenging. Therefore, to transform your desired behaviors into lasting habits, you must make them as easy to perform as possible. Fortunately, there are ways to simplify habits, and in this booklet, we'll discuss two of them. Method 1. One way to make habits easier is to reduce friction. Here's an example of what we mean by reducing friction. James Clear, the author of this book, never feels like sending greeting or condolence cards. His wife, however, always sends cards to friends and acquaintances on various occasions. Her secret is that she keeps a box filled with cards organized by occasion. Birthday, wedding, sympathy, and so on. That way, whenever an event arises, she can send a suitable card effortlessly. She has made the process so simple that she doesn't have to go out every time someone gets married or experiences a loss. For her, there's no barrier, no friction to sending cards. You can also use this technique to increase friction for bad habits. For example, if you want to watch less television, unplug it or remove the batteries from the remote. Doing this creates enough friction that you'll only turn it on when you truly want to watch something specific, instead of wasting time flipping through channels. Method 2. The second method for making habits easier in the long run is using the 2-minute rule. This rule makes any activity simple and manageable. According to it, any activity can be turned into a small habit that takes only 2 minutes to complete. For instance, if you want to read more books, don't make your goal read 1 book per week. Instead, promise yourself that you'll read just 2 pages every night. If you want to run a marathon, start with the habit of simply putting on your running shoes. With the 2-minute rule, you can easily create doable habits, habits that may lead to extraordinary results. After reading 2 pages, you'll probably continue reading more. Likewise, after putting on your running shoes, you'll likely step outside and start running. The key behind this rule is simple. Starting a task is the first and most important step toward completing it. Pleasurable habits. Let's start with an example that demonstrates the importance of making habits enjoyable. In the 1990s, Stephen Luby, a public health researcher, traveled to Karachi, Pakistan. At that time, the city's hygiene and overall health conditions were extremely poor. Luby knew that hand-washing and basic hygiene practices were essential for reducing illness among the population. The people of Karachi also understood this fact, yet they had not developed a habit of washing their hands regularly. Even though soap was available, they rarely used it, and when they did, they would wash for only a few seconds with just water. To address the city's hygiene problem, Luby collaborated with the Procter & Gamble Company, which produced a special soap tailored for the people of Karachi and distributed it to them for free. The soap was easy to lather and had a pleasant fragrance. As a result, hand-washing became an enjoyable experience. Suddenly, people started washing their hands regularly because the act itself brought them a sense of satisfaction and pleasure. The impact on Karachi's public health was dramatic. Common illnesses among the population significantly declined. As we can see, making habits pleasurable is a powerful way to establish new behaviors and encourage lasting change. However, this is more difficult than it seems. In today's world, we live in an environment where we rarely see the results of our actions immediately. For example, you work for a month and receive your salary at the end. You go to the gym each morning, but your weight doesn't drop instantly. Our ancestors thought mostly about short-term concerns, finding food, shelter, or escaping predators, not long-term outcomes like saving for retirement or following a diet plan. Our brains retain the same structure as those of prehistoric humans. We crave immediate results and instant pleasure. Yet our environment has changed dramatically, offering delayed rewards instead. That's why making habits enjoyable isn't easy. Good habits produce incredible results in the long run, but since their rewards aren't immediate, we often lose patience and abandon them. Conversely, bad habits cause harm over time but provide instant gratification, so we cling to them. For instance, if you smoke cigarettes, you may develop lung cancer 20 years later. But in the moment, smoking reduces your stress and satisfies your craving for nicotine. Thus, you ignore its long-term harm and keep smoking. Therefore, if you want to build a habit with no immediate reward, try adding an element that creates instant pleasure. Consider this example. A couple wanted to eat out less often and cook more meals at home to live healthier and save money. To motivate themselves, they opened a bank account called Europe Trip. Each time they skipped dining out and cooked at home instead, they transferred $50 into that account. Watching the balance grow in their Europe Trip fund gave them an immediate sense of joy and strengthened their commitment to this new habit. A framework for sticking to habits. Whether you want to develop the habit of journaling or quit the harmful habit of smoking, managing your own behaviors is never easy. Fortunately, there are simple yet effective ways to take control of your habits. In this booklight, we'll look at two of these methods. Method 1. Tracking habits is a simple but very powerful method. Many people use this technique to evaluate how well they're sticking to their habits. Probably the most famous person to use this approach was Benjamin Franklin. Starting at age 20, he carried a small notebook wherever he went. In it, he listed 13 personal virtues, among them avoiding useless conversations and constantly being engaged in something productive. Every night, he would record how successful he had been in living according to those virtues. You can do the same thing using a simple calendar or journal toe track and evaluate your habits. Mark the days when you stick to them, or make short notes about your progress. Tracking your habits is itself an enjoyable and motivating habit. Method 2. Another method for maintaining consistency is to use a habit contract. In this contract, you specify what consequences you'll face if you fail to stick to your habit. Here's an example of how it works. Brian Harris, an entrepreneur from Nashville, decided to write a habit contract to help him lose weight. In his contract, he committed to reaching a weight of 90 kilograms and listed the habits that would get him there, such as tracking daily calorie intake and weighing himself each week. He also set penalties for failing to follow through. If he didn't measure and manage his calories, he had to pay $100 to his personal trainer. If he forgot to weigh himself, he owed $500 to his wife. Finally, the contract was signed by Harris, his wife, and his trainer. The strategy worked. Harris didn't want to lose money, and he didn't want to feel embarrassed in front of his wife and trainer. Human beings are social creatures. We care about how others perceive us. Knowing that someone is monitoring our behavior motivates us to keep our commitments and strive toward our goals. You can also use a habit contract yourself. It doesn't need to be as strict as Harris's. Simply make a promise to your spouse, best friend, or colleague that you'll stay consistent with your habits. If you set a small penalty for breaking your commitment, you'll find yourself even more motivated to follow through. Final words. A small change in your behavior won't bring immediate or extraordinary results. But if that behavior turns into a habit you repeat every day, it will undoubtedly lead to major transformation over time. When we talk about making a change in life, we don't mean flipping your world upside down overnight. The correct way to create lasting change is to commit yourself to a set of small, constructive habits that eventually produce significant outcomes. To build positive habits, keep in mind that they should be attractive, easy, and enjoyable. And to ensure you stay consistent, you can use methods such as habit tracking and habit contracts. Practical suggestion: use your current habits to help you build new ones. If you want to create a new habit, perform it immediately after one of your existing habits. For example, suppose you'd like to start meditating but can't seem to find the right time. Think about the activities you already do effortlessly each day, such as drinking your morning coffee. You can meditate right after finishing your coffee. In this way, by linking the new habit to an existing one, you can smoothly incorporate it into your daily routine.